The moment my sister mocked my empty life, my parents just laughed. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing at the walking ATM that paid for their house, their cars, and the very meal we were eating. If you've ever been the family's designated piggy bank, hit subscribe. This is the story of how I finally went bankrupt on purpose. My name is Dylan Carroll, and the knot in my chest had been tightening for the entire 40-minute drive from Denver. It was a familiar sensation, the kind of dread that settles in your gut when you know you are walking into a performance. Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Aurora was always a performance. From the outside, it was perfect. The table glowed under the soft light of tapered candles my mother, Elaine, loved. The air was thick with the scent of roast chicken, garlic, and rosemary. Bottles of decent red wine were open and breathing on the sideboard. It was the picture of suburban warmth, a postcard from a life I was supposed to want. I am 34 years old. I'm a senior user experience researcher at Lumen Bridge Analytics, a tech firm in Denver that's doing well enough to make my parents proud in public. I am the career child, the one who made it out. What that really means is that I am the family's nonprofit foundation, the emergency fund, the primary investor, and the chief financial officer for a company designed to bleed me dry. I am the bottomless wallet that makes all this warmth possible. The knot in my stomach wasn't just anxiety, it was the physical manifestation of my bank account bracing for impact. We were just finishing the main course. My father, Martin, was telling a story about his golf game that nobody was listening to. My mother was smiling vaguely, already thinking about dessert, and my younger sister, Brianna, the family's creative soul, pushed back her chair just enough to make a sound. She lifted her wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice pitched just a little too loud, designed to cut through the chatter. My father stopped talking. My mother beamed, thinking it was something sweet. I felt my shoulders tense. Brianna looked directly at me, a wide, innocent smile plastered on her face. "To my big sister, Dylan." I raised my glass, my own smile feeling like a cheap mask. "I was just thinking," she continued, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "It's so nice we can all be here, Martin and Elaine, me and my new fiancé." She gestured to the empty chair beside her. As her fiancé was conveniently at a buddies thing, she turned her gaze back to me, the smile sharpening. "Where's your husband and all your kids? Dylan? Oh, wait." She let the pause hang in the air, a perfect, calculated beat of silence. "You don't have anything to show off." The world went into slow motion. I could hear the precise scrape of my father's fork against his porcelain plate. I could smell the sharp, buttery tang of the garlic bread on the platter in the center of the table, the heat from the oven, which Mom always left cracked open, washed over the side of my face. All these tiny physical details rushed into my senses, and then just as quickly, they blurred. The only thing in sharp focus was the sound that came next. It started with my mother, a high, tittering laugh that she tried to cover with her napkin, but it escaped anyway, shaking her shoulders. Then my father joined in. His was a low, wheezing snort, the kind he used when he thought something was genuinely, profoundly funny. I stared at them. I watched the laughter ripple through them, and in that second, something inside me didn't just crack. It vaporized. This wasn't the awkward laughter of people trying to smooth over a social blunder. This wasn't a "Brianna, don't be rude" moment. They weren't embarrassed by her cruelty. They were entertained by it. They were laughing with her, my sacrifice, my solitude. The life I had put on hold to keep this very table standing was a punchline. My emptiness was their Sunday entertainment. The moment passed. My mother dabbed her eyes, still chuckling. "Oh, Brianna, you're terrible," she said, but her tone was pure affection. My father shook his head, taking a big gulp of wine. "That's a good one." And just like that, they moved on, as if a bomb hadn't just gone off, as if I hadn't just been vivisected at my own family dinner. The conversation seamlessly shifted. My father started talking about the tuition for Brianna's latest passion project, some online certification in crystal healing. My mother began detailing the plans for Brianna's engagement party, the one I would undoubtedly be expected to finance. They talked about children, about weddings, about down payments, about school districts. They talked around me, past me, through me. I was not a participant. I was not their daughter. I was a spectator in the crowd, holding a ticket I had been forced to buy. My invisibility was so complete, it was suffocating. I always had two choices in these moments. I could cry, which would earn me accusations of being too sensitive, or I could storm out, which would make me dramatic and ungrateful. I would then be expected to call and apologize, and to smooth things over. I would send money. It was a neat, closed loop. But this time, I felt neither tears nor rage. I felt nothing. It was a cold, clean, beautiful void. The knot in my stomach was gone, replaced by something hard and solid, steel. I set my wine glass down. I didn't slam it. I placed it on the linen tablecloth with absolute precision, making no sound. I smiled. It was a very small smile. It didn't touch my eyes. It probably looked terrifying. I felt a switch flip in my brain. The main power grid shutting down and a backup generator kicking on. This new system ran on different fuel. I waited for a lull in the conversation, which didn't take long. I tilted my head, adopting the same light, conversational tone Brianna had used. "Where's your savings account, Brianna?" She blinked, the smugness wavering. "What?" "Your savings account," I repeated, my voice as soft as the candlelight. "Or your retirement fund, or even just a checking account that isn't overdrawn." I let that hang in the air, just as she had. "Oh, right, you don't have one." I turned my small, cold smile to my parents, who were staring at me, confused. "Because I've been paying for every last thing." This time, the room didn't just go quiet, it froze. My father's fork, halfway to his mouth with a piece of chicken, stopped. My mother's hand, reaching for the wine, froze in midair. Brianna's face, which had been pale with confusion, began to flood with a deep, ugly red. No one reacted. No one could. The script had just been set on fire. I let my gaze travel around the table, making eye contact with each of them. The loving father, the nurturing mother, the creative little sister, the predators. "I paid for this meal," I said, my voice still quiet, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. "I paid for the groceries. I paid for this wine, which I picked out. By the way, I paid the utility bill that cooked the chicken and lit this room. I paid the deposit on this house, Martin, 7 years ago, so the bank wouldn't foreclose." My father's face went white. "I pay for your car insurance, Brianna, the car I co-signed for, the gas money I send you every other week, the rent on your apartment that you're always just a little short on." "Dylan, that's enough," my father finally managed. Finding his voice, he tried to make it a command. It came out as a croak. "No," I said, not loud, just final. "I'm not done. I've paid for your health insurance. Mom, I've paid for your golf club memberships. Dad, I've paid for every failed online business, every yoga retreat, every artist's workshop for Brianna. I have paid for this entire family's life for 7 years." I looked back at Brianna, who now looked like she might be sick. "You're right. I don't have a husband. I don't have kids. I don't have anything to show off, because everything I've earned, every late night at the office, every weekend I worked, every vacation I skipped, is sitting right here, at this table." I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound was violent in the silence. And as of today, that stops. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever been treated like a walking ATM by your own family, if you've ever been the designated piggy bank that everyone shakes down while simultaneously mocking you for being responsible, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because this story is for you. I picked up my purse from the floor. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. My mother was openly crying now, silent, shocked tears. My father looked like he'd been punched. Brianna was just staring at her plate, her knuckles white. "I'm heading back to Denver," I said, my voice polite, as if I were leaving a dull office party. "Enjoy your meal." I walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked down the hallway, past the photos of my childhood, of Brianna's graduations, of family vacations I had paid for. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cool Aurora night, and pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the latch wasn't an ending. It was the starting gun for a war. My apartment in Rhino is the perfect image of minimalist tech success. It's all clean lines, polished concrete floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the Denver skyline. I have a German-made coffee machine that costs more than my first car, a sleek workstation with 3 calibrated monitors, and a low-profile sofa that probably cost $5,000. It's a space designed to be photographed, to be admired. It looks like a life, but that night, walking in after the drive from Aurora, the silence was deafening. The entire place felt like a hollow set, a stage for a person who didn't actually exist. The real me, the one who just got eviscerated by her own family, didn't live here. This apartment was just another bill I paid. The whole thing started, as these things always do, with a temporary crisis. It was 7 years ago. I had just landed my first significant promotion at Lumenbridge. I was finally making real money, the kind of salary that felt solid. Then the call came from my father, Martin. His hours at the logistics warehouse were being cut. They were restructuring, and he was just a little short. That was the phrase, just a little short. "I just need some help with the mortgage for a few months." "Dylan," he'd said, his voice full of that false, gravelly pride he used when he was about to ask for a handout. "Just until I get back on my feet. I don't want your mother to worry." A few months. It sounded so reasonable. I was the career child. I had the 6-figure salary. Of course I would help. It was the right thing to do. So I set up an automatic payment to the bank. Front Range Home Finance. A few months of helping my parents keep their house. But Martin never got back on his feet. The restructuring became permanent, and my temporary help became the new normal. My name, my bank account, became permanently linked to that mortgage payment in Aurora. It was the first anchor. After a year, I don't think any of us even questioned it anymore. It was just one of my bills, like my own rent or my internet. Then my mother, Elaine, started her own campaign. Hers was softer, built on a foundation of gentle guilt and plausible deniability. It started with the utilities. "Honey, the electric bill is just astronomical this month. I don't know what happened. Could you just cover this one?" One time became a monthly habit. Then it was the gas bill, then the water bill, then the master stroke, the family credit card, the one she used just for groceries. "It's just easier, Dylan," she'd explained, her voice like warm honey. "Instead of you sending me bits and pieces, why don't you just take over the supermarket card? That way we know we're all taken care of." And I did. I took over the card. Suddenly, I wasn't just paying for their groceries. I was paying for their dinners out, their impulse buys at Target, the bottles of wine for Sunday dinner. The anchors were set. The help was no longer help. It was an expectation. It was my duty. And once that foundation was laid, the entitlement began to build on top of it, floor by floor. The cable bill suddenly jumped. When I asked, my father got defensive. "We need the premium sports package. Dylan, it's the only relaxation I get." The internet bill tripled. "Brianna needs the highest speed possible for her creative work," Mom explained. "You can't put a price on her art, honey. She needs the tools to succeed." Then came the treadmill. A $2,000 machine appeared in their basement. "Your father's doctor said he needs to improve his health," Mom told me, as if this were a prescription I was obligated to fill. "It's an investment in his future." And then there was Brianna. My sister, the artist. She was a black hole of financial need, disguised as a sensitive soul. She was always on the verge of her big break, and that big break was always one expensive purchase away. First, it was the online clothing boutique. I paid for the web hosting, the inventory, and the shipping supplies. It failed in 6 months. Then, it was the Etsy shop for handmade jewelry. I paid for the beads, the silver, the professional-grade crafting tools. That lasted maybe 4 months. Then came her current grift, the lifestyle vlog. This was the most expensive project yet. She needed a new, top-of-the-line laptop. I paid for it. She needed a DSLR camera and a ring light. I paid for those, too. She needed professional marketing courses, subscription fees for editing software, and money to rent studio space for lookbook photo shoots. I paid, and paid, and paid. Every time I tried to ask questions, to suggest a budget, or to even hint at the word no, the guilt machine was deployed. "Dylan, you're the strong one," my father would say, adopting his man-of-the-house tone. "You're the one who's good with this stuff. We don't have anyone else to turn to." "Your sister is just so sensitive," my mother would whisper, pulling me aside. "This criticism crushes her. She's trying so hard. Honey, don't do this to her. Don't break her spirit. She just needs a little more support." A little more support. That was the line. My entire life became dedicated to providing a little more support. My life in Denver was a lie. My friends at work, other professionals in their 30s, talked about their 401ks, their vacations to Costa Rica, their plans to buy condos. I would nod along, sipping my expensive coffee, talking about market volatility and aggressive savings goals. The truth? I'd spend a Saturday night alone in my beautiful, empty apartment, staring at my banking app. I'd watch my paycheck, my impressive, 6-figure salary paycheck, land in my account, and then I would watch it bleed out in real time. A transfer to Front Range Home Finance for the Aurora mortgage, a transfer to Elaine Carroll for the credit card, a transfer to Brianna Carroll for her rent, a transfer to the family phone plan, a transfer for the car insurance. Within 48 hours, more than half of my monthly income was gone. It vanished before I even had a chance to think about what I needed. I ate instant ramen for dinner in my $5,000 sofa. I wore the same professional wardrobe I'd had for 3 years because I couldn't justify buying new clothes. When my friends invited me out for brunch, I'd say I was busy. "I'm swamped with a project," I'd text. The truth was, I couldn't afford a $20 plate of Eggs Benedict. I couldn't risk it. What if Brianna had an emergency? What if the grocery bill was higher this month? The shame was acidic. It was easier to just stay home, to isolate myself. The little betrayals were the worst. The things that proved it wasn't about survival. I remember scrolling through Instagram and seeing a post from Brianna. She was at a spa in Santa Fe. The geotag was right there. She had her feet up, a glass of champagne in hand, with the caption, "Needed this creative reset. So blessed." I checked my bank account. The emergency transfer of $500 I had sent her 3 days prior, the one she needed for a car repair, was gone. Or the time I drove my 10-year-old car, with its rattling engine and failing air conditioner, to their house for Thanksgiving. I walked in and saw it. A brand new, massive, leather sectional sofa in the living room. It was one of those ones with electric recliners and USB ports. "We had to get it, Dylan," my mother said, patting the cushion. "We need something nice for when we have guests." I looked at the monstrous sofa, then thought about my rattling car, and just nodded. I had nothing. I had no emergency fund. My 401k contributions were the bare minimum, just enough to get the company match. I had no savings account to speak of. I had no dream vacation fund. I had no plans to buy my own place. I didn't even have a pet. I couldn't commit to the vet bills. My entire future, my entire youth, was on permanent hold. Everything was later. Everything was after my parents were stable, after Brianna found her footing. But after was never coming. Stable was a moving target that I was funding. As I stood in my silent apartment, the skyline glittering like a promise I couldn't claim, the cold realization settled in. That Sunday dinner wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't a mean-spirited joke. It was a status update. It was the board of directors laughing at their sole investor. I wasn't a dutiful daughter. I wasn't the strong one. I was an unsecured line of credit with no interest and no repayment plan. And that night, at that dinner table, my family had just given me the final, coldest, most brutal confirmation. My only value was my balance. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the silent, dark expanse of my apartment, my keys cold in my hand, and went straight to my workstation. The drive back from Aurora had been silent, the 40 minutes of freeway punctuated only by the sound of my own steady breathing. There were no tears. Tears felt like a currency I was no longer willing to spend. I dropped my keys on the concrete counter. They made a sharp, metallic sound that echoed in the vaulted ceiling. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the one I'd spent $1,200 on to protect my back during the 60-hour work weeks that funded their lives. My 3 monitors glowed to life, bathing my face in cool, blue light. My fingers didn't tremble as I typed the password to my bank. For 7 years, logging into this account had felt like a descent, a daily reminder of my servitude. Tonight, it felt like I was accessing a control panel. I wasn't Dylan Carroll, the daughter. I was Dylan Carroll, the senior UX researcher, the systems analyst, and I was about to conduct the most profound usability test of my life. I clicked on the Bill Pay and Transfers tab. The page loaded. It was a neat, orderly list of my financial commitments, my shackles. First, Front Range Home Finance, the mortgage, the big one. The payment was scheduled to auto-draft on the 1st of the month, just 4 days away. My mouse hovered, then clicked. Manage scheduled payment. I clicked Cancel Payment Series. A small, frictionless pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? This action cannot be undone. A cold, sharp joy, bright as magnesium, flared in my chest. I clicked Yes. The line item on the screen vanished, just like that. The first chain link didn't just break, it ceased to exist. Second, Aurora City Utilities, gas, water, electric, scheduled for the 5th. Manage payment. Cancel series. Are you sure? Yes. Another one gone. Third, the family credit card, the Visa with my mother's name on it, the one just for groceries, that somehow always had a $2,000 balance for restaurant tabs and spa days. Cancel series. Are you sure? Yes. The high-speed internet that Brianna needed for her creative work. Yes. The premium cable package with all the sports channels for my father. Yes. The subscription services, the streaming platforms, the digital newspaper. Yes. 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 Each click was a clean, percussive snap, a tether severed, a weight lifted. My breathing was even. My hand was rock steady. Next, I opened a new browser tab. The family phone plan. My name was at the top, account owner, and listed beneath me, like dependents. Martin Carroll, Elaine Carroll, Brianna Carroll, 3 lines, all flowing from my bank account, all nested under my financial authority. I navigated through the labyrinthine customer portal, a user experience I had often criticized professionally, until I found the option I was looking for: transfer account ownership. I typed in my father's name, I typed in his email address, I typed in his social security number, which I knew by heart from the half-dozen loan applications I had co-signed for him. A final confirmation screen appeared. You are about to transfer full financial and legal responsibility for lines ending in 528, 491, and 733 to Martin Carroll. This action is irreversible. A slow, wide smile spread across my face. It felt unfamiliar. Irreversible was the most beautiful word in the English language. I clicked Confirm. Finally, the apps, the insidious little leaks. I opened the payment app I used to send Brianna her rent and emergency money. I found her contact, with the smiling selfie she'd taken on the vacation I paid for. I clicked the 3 dots. Block user. I logged into my other payment accounts. I removed the family credit card as a backup payment source. I unlinked my bank account. I changed the associated email from my primary one to a new, sterile one I had created just for this purpose. I turned off every single notification related to family or requests. I was done. I pushed back from my desk. The silence in the apartment rushed in to fill the new void. It was different now. This was the first time in my adult life that the quiet in my expensive apartment didn't feel like loneliness. It was the sound of a space that was finally, completely mine. I could hear the faint, low-frequency hum of the high-end refrigerator. I could hear the analog tick of the minimalist clock on the far wall. A light rain began to tap against the floor-to-ceiling windows, a gentle percussion against the Denver night. It wasn't empty, it was clear. I took off my coat, hung it in the closet, and went to bed. I fell asleep in under 10 minutes and did not dream. The next morning, I went to work. I made my coffee, put on a sharp blazer, and walked into the Lumen Bridge Analytics office at 8:15, ready for my 9 o'clock presentation. I felt rested. I felt sharp. I was setting up my laptop in the glass-walled conference room when my phone, placed on the polished oak table, vibrated. I glanced down. A text from my mother. "Good morning, honey. Just a reminder you forgot to transfer the mortgage money. Love you." I looked at the message. I registered the words. I felt no guilt, no panic, no familiar urge to apologize and fix it. I simply observed it. It buzzed again. My father, Dylan, bank payment didn't go through. Fix it. Another buzz. Brianna. Hey, need my rent money ASAP. It's urgent. My landlord is texting me. My team started to file in, grabbing coffee. My boss, Sarah, gave me a nod. Ready, Dylan? Absolutely, I said. I smiled, picked up my phone, and did something I had never done in my entire professional career. I turned it over, screen down, on the table. I stood up and began my presentation. I pointed to the complex flowchart projected on the main screen. Good morning, everyone. As you can see from the data, our user is getting trapped in this feedback loop. My voice was crisp, confident. They're trying to exit the flow, but every path we've designed, every error message, every prompt, just routes them back to the same point of friction. My phone buzzed, a long, angry vibration. They're stuck, I continued, not missing a beat. And they're frustrated. The data shows our user abandonment rate at this specific node is over 60%. It buzzed again, and again, a relentless, furious rattling on the oak table. My colleagues politely ignored it. I ignored it too, clicking to the next slide. My recommendation is not to patch this. It's not to add another pop-up. It's to rebuild the entire exit pathway. We need to sever this loop completely. We need to give the user a clean, final, an absolute exit. No friction, no guilt. When the meeting ended 40 minutes later to a round of applause, I turned my phone over. The screen was a wall of notifications. 9 missed calls, 15 new text messages. The tone had shifted from polite reminders to passive-aggressive panic. Mom. Dylan, this isn't funny. Your father is very upset. You must be mad about yesterday. Don't be so childish. Call me. Mom. Call me right now. You are embarrassing us. The bank just called Martin directly. Brianna. Okay, I get it. You're mad. It was just a joke. You're so sensitive. Why are you being like this? I'm literally going to get evicted. Dad. You have until 5 p.m. to fix this, or you'll regret it. It was the entire family playbook, deployed in a single, desperate barrage. The guilt, the minimizing, the threat. By the time I left the office at 6, the calls were coming every 5 minutes. I let every single one go directly to voicemail. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink. I poured a tall glass of water. The old Dylan would have been on the floor, hyperventilating. The old Dylan would have been frantically calling back, sobbing, apologizing. The old Dylan would have transferred the money, along with an extra $500 as a peace offering. The new Dylan sat down at her workstation. I plugged my phone into my laptop. I opened my voicemail. My mother's voice, no longer sweet, but a high-pitched, panicked shriek. Dylan Marie Carroll, I don't know what game you are playing, but you are destroying this family. Your father's health. After everything we have done for you. My father's low and menacing. You think you're so smart. You think you can just cut us off. You have no idea what you just did. You are still my daughter, and you will. Brianna's, a full-blown screaming tantrum. It's all your fault. I'm going to be homeless, and it's your fault. You've always been a jealous, selfish bitch. I hope you're happy. My hand was steady. I didn't wince. I saved the audio file of every single voicemail. I took high-resolution screenshots of every text message. I archived the emails. I created a new, encrypted folder on my secure hard drive. I titled it, simply, Carol, Proof. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. I wasn't a victim in a messy family drama anymore. I was a researcher. I was a data analyst. I was documenting the behavior of a hostile system that had been exploiting me for years. This wasn't a fight. It was a case file. For 3 more days, the barrage continued, an avalanche of abuse, and then, on Thursday morning, it stopped. Complete silence. My phone didn't buzz, no new emails, no unhinged texts. I checked my accounts, no activity. I checked my email, nothing. I walked through my apartment, phone in hand, feeling the sudden, total absence of the assault. This was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the peace I had felt on Sunday night. This was the heavy, pressurized silence of a storm gathering just offshore. This was the quiet of people who had tried rattling the front door, found it locked, and were now walking around the side of the house, looking for an open window. This was the silence of people making a plan. The silence lasted for 72 hours. It was not a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating absence of noise. The storm had not passed. It was a hurricane holding its breath, gathering strength just off the coast. The quiet was a tactic, and it made my skin crawl. It was this creeping unease, this feeling of being watched, that drove me, late on a Wednesday night, to the metal filing cabinet tucked into the corner of my home office. It was the one piece of furniture that didn't match my minimalist aesthetic. It was old, beige, and heavy. It was the place I avoided, the physical archive of my obligations and my bad decisions, my car lease, my apartment rental agreement, tax returns, and the thickest file in the drawer, the one labeled simply Aurora Property. My hands felt strange, detached, as I pulled the folder out. The cardboard was soft at the edges from 7 years of handling. I sat down at my workstation, the glow of my monitors illuminating the dust on the file's cover. I opened it, the beam of my sleek LED desk lamp cutting across the papers. I was no longer a daughter. I was an auditor. I was investigating a hostile system. There it was, right on top, the original mortgage agreement, dated 7 years ago. I scanned the pages, the dense blocks of text that had once seemed so intimidating. I remembered that day at the bank. I'd worn my first good suit, bought specifically for the occasion. I'd felt so adult, so capable, so proud. I was saving the family home. My signature, real and clear, was at the bottom, right next to Martin's and Elaine's. It looked so naive now, so young. I had told myself, sitting in that stuffy office, that it was just for a few years, just until they got stable. 7 years. I had been paying for 7 years. I sifted deeper into the file, past the insurance printouts and the property tax receipts I had paid, year after year, past the disclosures and the addendums, and then I found it. It was another stack of papers, stapled together, dated 3 years ago. The letterhead was identical, Front Range Home Finance, but the title was different, Home Equity Line of Credit Agreement. My stomach went cold. I had never taken out a home equity line of credit. I had never even discussed it. I flipped through the pages, my heart starting a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. The legalese blurred. My eyes searched for the numbers, and I found them. A principal loan amount, $60,000. And there, on the final signature page, dated October 14th, were the three names, Martin Carroll, Elaine Carroll, and Dylan Carroll. I stared at it. I physically could not process the information. My brain kept rejecting it. $60,000. I didn't have $60,000. I didn't have $6,000. Where was this money? What had they spent it on? 3 years ago, October, my mind is a steel trap for dates. It's a critical part of my job. I pulled out my phone, my hand trembling slightly. I opened my calendar. I scrolled back, month by month, year by year, until I hit October, 3 years prior. My thumb stopped. October 14th. I was in Chicago. I was standing on a brightly lit stage at the Omni Hotel, giving the keynote presentation for the annual UX Midwest Conference. I had the photos on my phone. I had the plane ticket receipt saved in my email. I had the catering bill from the corporate dinner I hosted. I was unequivocally, provably, not in Aurora, Colorado, sitting in a Front Range home finance branch. I grabbed my wallet from my bag and pulled out my driver's license. I laid it on the desk, right next to the forged document. I angled the bright desk lamp closer, illuminating the two signatures side by side. It was a good attempt. They knew my handwriting. They had seen it on 1,000 birthday cards and checks, but it was wrong. The D in Dylan, it was too looped, too optimistic. My D is sharp, an impatient angle. The C in Carol, it was too rounded, too careful. And the L's, the final two L's at the end of my name, I always loop them together. A quick, impatient flourish that's almost illegible. This signature, they were drawn, two separate, careful, drawn loops, the signature of someone painstakingly imitating, not writing. A feeling that wasn't anger, not yet, but a cold, metallic sickness, started rising from my stomach into my throat. I felt like I was going to be sick right onto my keyboard. I didn't hesitate. I picked up my phone. I found the bank's number on the letterhead and dialed the 24-hour customer service line. My voice, when I spoke, was a perfect imitation of the old Dylan. Slightly confused, polite, helpful, a customer trying to get her affairs in order. "Hi," I said, when a cheerful agent named Brenda answered. "My name is Dylan Carroll. I'm just reviewing some of my mortgage documents for my records, and I seem to have a question about a home equity line of credit from a few years back. The account number is..." I read it directly off the page. Brenda's keyboard clicked away. "Okay, Ms. Carroll, I see that right here. The $60,000 HELOC, opened on October 14th, 3 years ago. What's your question about it?" I kept my voice light, breezy. "It's silly, I know, but I'm just trying to organize my files. And I'm not seeing my copy of the final income verification. I just wanted to confirm who was present at the signing." More clicking. "No problem at all. Let me just check the branch logs for that day." A pause. "Yep, looks like a standard signing. It shows all 3 co-signers were present that afternoon at our Aurora branch. Martin Carroll, Elaine Carroll, and you, Dylan Carroll." The room tilted. They had hired someone, or one of them had. No, it didn't matter. They had physically gone into the bank and claimed to be me. The nausea was real now. I gripped the edge of my desk. "That's great. Thank you. And can you just confirm one more thing for me? I'm looking at my main account, and I'm confused about the repayment. How was that structured? I don't see a separate bill for it." "Oh, that was simple," Brenda said, her voice painfully helpful. "According to the file, when you all signed, you authorized the monthly payments for the HELOC to be debited directly from the same account you use for the primary mortgage. It was all bundled together for your convenience." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a separate bill. It wasn't an extra payment I had somehow missed. They had buried it. They had folded the repayment into the main mortgage payment I was making, the automatic payment I had set up 7 years ago, the one I had just canceled, hadn't just been paying the house off. It had been paying off their secret, fraudulent, $60,000 loan. My money had been paying the debt they incurred by stealing my name. "Brenda," I said, My voice was a whisper. I cleared my throat, forcing it back to normal. You have been so helpful. I hate to be a pain, but would it be possible to get a high-resolution scan of that final signature page emailed to me? Just for my records. Of course, I seem to have misplaced my original. Of course, it's no trouble at all. I can send that right over to your secure inbox. You should see it in about 5 minutes. Thank you, Brenda. You've been a great help. I hung up. I stood up, but my legs were unsteady. I walked to my minimalist kitchen, the one with the German coffee machine that cost more than their first car. I opened the stainless steel fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely twist the cap. The water was cold, but it didn't stop the hot, acidic bile rising in my throat. This was not being taken advantage of. This was not being the responsible child. This was not family helping family. This was a crime. This was felony-level identity theft. This was bank fraud. This was forgery. My own parents. My father, who taught me to ride a bike. My mother, who packed my lunches. They had sat in a bank, looked a notary in the eye, and drawn my name on a legal document to steal $60,000. And they had designed the perfect system to have me pay for it. A parasite feeding on its host in secret. My laptop pinged. The email had arrived. I walked back to my desk, my steps heavy. I opened the secure message. There it was, a crystal clear, high-resolution PDF, the signature page, and there was my name, forged in blue ink, stark and undeniable. I printed it twice. I took a yellow highlighter from my desk drawer, a tool of my trade, used for marking up user data, and drew a thick, bright, angry yellow box around the forgery. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the encrypted folder on my hard drive, the one I had named Carol, Proof, the folder with the screenshots of the abusive texts, the folder with the audio files of the screaming voicemails. I now understood, on a primal level, why my subconscious had forced me to create it. My analytical brain knew, before my emotional brain was willing to admit, that this was not a dispute, it was an indictment. I scanned the highlighted document. I saved it to the folder. I added the bank's email log. I added my calendar screenshots from Chicago. I added my plane ticket receipts. I stood up and went into the bathroom. I looked at myself in the large, backlit mirror. My face was pale. My eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a terrible, cold rage. The narrative they had built for 34 years, that I was the difficult one, the cold one, the ungrateful one, the one who was too sensitive, it all shattered and fell away like broken glass. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the bad daughter who was tearing the family apart or sending her dad to jail. I was the victim. I was a victim of a long con, a 7-year operation of financial and emotional abuse that had just escalated to a federal crime. And a victim has standing. A victim has rights. A victim gets to press charges. I stared at my own reflection. I thought of my father's wheezing laugh at the dinner table. I thought of my mother's mocking smile. They had laughed at my emptiness while actively, criminally, robbing me blind. If my parents were willing to sign my name, what did I really owe them anymore? The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, my voice a flat, believable monotone. The rage from the night before had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, dense, and perfectly clear purpose. I was no longer a daughter in a state of shock. I was a researcher with a data set, and my next step was to find an expert to help me analyze it. I sat at my workstation, the Carol Proof folder open on my main monitor. I opened a new browser tab. My fingers typed, Fraud Attorney Denver. The search results were a sea of aggressive, smiling men in bad suits, all promising fast cash and aggressive representation. That wasn't what I needed. I wasn't looking for a pit bull. I was looking for a surgeon. My professional training kicked in. I refined my search query. Denver financial crimes attorney. Colorado elder fraud specialist. Intra-family financial abuse. I was building a user profile for my ideal legal counsel. I wasn't just a victim. I was a client, and I was hiring for a specific, delicate, and brutal job. I spent 3 hours cross-referencing names from the Bar Association, reading legal blogs, and most importantly, looking for reviews that spoke to discretion and strategy, not just courtroom brawling. One name kept surfacing in the more niche, complex case forums: Naomi Blake. Her website was like her: no nonsense, text-based, and built for clarity. Naomi Blake, Esquire, specializing in financial malfeasance, identity theft, and complex family asset disputes. Her photo was that of a woman in her late 40s, sharp, intelligent, and with eyes that looked like they didn't have time for emotional breakdowns. She was perfect. I booked a consultation for 2 p.m. that same day. Her office was in a small, respectable brick building in the Golden Triangle, not a high-rise. The suite was small, clean, and organized. The walls were painted a calm gray. The furniture was modern but functional. There was no drama here. This was a place where problems were systematically dismantled. Naomi Blake was exactly as her photo suggested. She shook my hand firmly, her grip dry and strong. She didn't offer fake sympathy. She just gestured to the chair opposite her desk and said, "Ms. Carroll, tell me what's going on." For the first time in my life, I did. I didn't cry. I didn't editorialize. I didn't talk about my feelings or the dinner table or my sister's cruelty. I presented my findings. I was Dylan Carroll, senior UX researcher, walking a stakeholder through a critical data set. 7 years ago, I co-signed on a mortgage for my parents' home in Aurora. I began. I laid the first document on her desk. For the past 7 years, I have been the sole person making that payment, as well as covering all utilities, insurance, and additional family expenses. I then placed the printout of my banking app transfers on her desk. This is a high-level summary of the bleed. The total estimated transfer is just north of $300,000 over 84 months. Naomi nodded, her pen moving across a yellow legal pad. She didn't flinch. She didn't look shocked or horrified. She just absorbed the data. On Sunday night, I informed them I would no longer be paying. This was the result. I took out my phone, plugged it into a portable drive, and transferred the audio files of the voicemails and the folder of screenshots. The folder is titled Carroll Proof. You'll find a full log of the harassment there. And then, I said, taking a breath, I found this. I saved the worst for last. I placed the highlighted, scanned copy of the forged home equity loan agreement in the center of her desk. I placed my driver's license next to it. This is a $60,000 home equity loan, taken out 3 years ago. As you can see, my signature is forged. I have calendar and travel receipts proving I was in Chicago on the day I supposedly signed this at the Aurora branch. I pushed the final paper across, and this is the bank's confirmation from last night, stating that the repayment for this fraudulent loan was bundled into the primary mortgage payment. I have been unknowingly paying off a loan that was taken out in my name, illegally, by my parents. I finished, I sat back. I had presented my case. Naomi finished writing her notes. She tapped the pen twice on her desk. She looked at the forged signature, then at me. Her expression was unreadable. "Well," she said, her voice flat, "this is a clean-cut case. Your family drama is messy, and frankly, irrelevant to the core issue. What you have right here," she tapped the forged document, "is identity theft, and because it involves a federally insured financial institution, it is felony-level bank fraud. If you want to, we can take this file, walk it over to the district attorney's office, and have your father, and possibly your mother, indicted." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Indicted, felony, DA. My stomach, which had been so cold and calm, suddenly felt full of wet cement. This was my father, the man who had put the bandage on my knee when I was 6. The word prison hung in the air between us, unspoken but suffocating. Naomi must have seen the change in my face, the flicker of doubt. She leaned forward, and for the first time, her voice softened, just slightly. But it wasn't sympathy, it was strategy. "Dylan, look at me. This $60,000 loan was 3 years ago. What happens in another 2 years? What happens when they max this out? They have your social security number. They have your date of birth. They have proven they are willing to forge your signature. If you do nothing, you are not just accepting this theft, you are greenlighting the next one, and the one after that. You will never be free. This will be your entire life, until they have ruined your credit, your finances, and your future. She was right. I knew she was right. So, she continued, leaning back, here is what I propose. You are my client. My duty is to solve your problem and mitigate your exposure. The problem is not your family's feelings. The problem is your legal and financial entanglement. We can go straight to the DA. But that's a messy, public, and long process. It's the nuclear option. She picked up her pen. I suggest a more surgical approach. We draft a formal legal ultimatum. It will be delivered to your parents via a process server. It will state the facts, that we are in possession of a fraudulent legal document. It will give your father, Martin, 2 options. She held up one finger. Option 1. He has 30 days. In that 30-day period, he will go to Front Range Home Finance. He will confess to the forgery, and he will sign any and all documents necessary to remove your name from that $60,000 loan and from the primary mortgage, assuming full and sole responsibility for all debts associated with that property. He will also sign a legally binding post-separation agreement, drafted by me, stipulating that he, your mother, and your sister will never again, directly or indirectly, contact you for any form of financial support. She held up a second finger. Option 2. He does nothing. He ignores the letter. He tries to call you and cry. He tries to intimidate you. If that 30-day deadline passes without full compliance from the bank, my office will automatically file this entire case file, the forgery, the voicemails, your travel receipts, everything, with the Arapahoe County District Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. It was brilliant. It was clean. It was a perfect piece of user flow design. It presented 2 clear binary paths. One was hard, but private. The other was catastrophic. And it took the burden of the decision off me and placed it squarely on my father. A cold, practical question surfaced. If he chooses option 2, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, if he does nothing, and you send that file, could my father actually go to prison? Naomi looked at me, her gaze level. Yes, for a crime of this nature, given the amount, a conviction would almost certainly carry a prison sentence. But you need to hear this. Dylan, if that happens, he will be the one who chooses it. You are offering him a way out. If he refuses to take it, that is his decision, not yours. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my dark living room, the city lights of Denver sprawling out below me, and I felt the full, crushing weight of 34 years of programmed guilt. He's your father. You're destroying the family. You're an ungrateful, selfish child. He's old. His health is bad. This will kill him. The voices of my mother, my father, my sister, all swirling in my head. I went to my desk, took out a blank sheet of paper, and drew a line down the middle. My research brain, desperate for clarity. On the left, I wrote, I continue to stay silent. Underneath it, I listed the outcomes. They do it again. I am financially ruined. I will never own a home. I will never retire. I will always be their ATM. I will always be their victim. I will live the rest of my life in this apartment, alone, paying for their sofa, their vacations, their lives. On the right, I wrote, I let the law work. The outcome is out of my hands. He can sign the papers. We all walk away. I am free. Or he can refuse. He can be prosecuted. He can go to prison. The family will be destroyed. I will be truly, completely alone. I stared at the 2 columns. It was a choice between my life and his. And as I sat there, the image of my father's wheezing laugh at the dinner table flashed in my mind. The image of my mother's cruel, amused smile. The image of my own signature, drawn by their hand, to steal from me. The internal turning point was not a wave of anger. It was a cold, hard, logical conclusion. I was willing to accept the worst-case scenario. I was willing to live with the fact that my father might go to prison, not because I wanted revenge, but because if I wasn't willing to go that far, if I wasn't willing to let that be a consequence, then the threat was empty, the ultimatum was a bluff, and I would be trapped in that left-hand column forever. I would rather be the daughter of a convicted felon than a slave for the rest of my life. The next morning, I was at Naomi's office at 9 a.m. I signed the retainer agreement. I signed the letter of authorization. I handed her a check for her fee. A painful but liberating expense. I gave her the Carol proof folder on a new encrypted hard drive. My entire case file. My life's data. She took it, and for the first time, she gave me a small, tight smile. "Good," she said. "The letter will be served by end of day tomorrow. From now on, you do not speak to them. You do not answer their calls, their texts, or their emails. You forward everything to me. They have 30 days. She stood up, walking me to the door. "Dylan," she said, stopping me, she looked me straight in the eye. "From now on, your family will no longer be the ones who define your value. The rest of this is just us following procedure." Naomi's letter was served on a Thursday. A professional process server, a large and entirely neutral man, had handed the envelope directly to my father as he was checking the mail. Naomi had the server's signed affidavit confirming receipt by 10 a.m. The 30-day clock was ticking. For the first 4 days, the silence was absolute. The digital barrage of texts and voicemails had stopped, but so had everything else. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet I had felt before, but now I knew why. They weren't just planning, they were reeling. They were in possession of a legal document that had taken their vague, emotional power play and turned it into a cold, hard, legal equation. Then, on Tuesday evening, my phone vibrated on my kitchen counter. It wasn't a call, it was a text message. From my father, Martin. I hadn't blocked their numbers, on Naomi's advice. "Let them create a record," she'd said. "Forward everything." I looked at the screen. The message was short, stripped of all emotion. Real or fake, it was a summons. "This Sunday, come home. We need to talk." That was it. Not, "Can you come?" Not, "We miss you." Not, "Please, let's sort this out." It was a command, issued from the throne of a king who didn't realize his castle was in foreclosure. I stared at the text. My thumb hovered over the block number option. The temptation was so strong it was a physical ache. Just disappear. Just let Naomi handle it. Let the 30 days run out. But I knew I couldn't. This was their next move, their only move, short of contacting a lawyer, which they would never do because it would require admitting the truth. They were pulling the family card. They were trying to get me back on their turf, back in that dining room, back into the role of Dylan, the difficult daughter. They needed to see me, to use the full force of their combined emotional weight to break me down in person. If I refused, I knew what came next. Escalation, a scene at my apartment building, a hysterical call to my boss at Lumen Bridge, an ambush in the lobby of my office. They would try to publicly shame me back into compliance. This confrontation was inevitable, but this time, it wouldn't be an ambush. It would be a scheduled meeting. I typed back a single, cold professional reply. "What time?" The battle lines were instantly redrawn. I wasn't the prodigal daughter crawling home for forgiveness. I was a party to a dispute, agreeing to attend a mediation. His reply came back almost instantly. "Noon, for lunch." Lunch, the classic trap, break bread, pass the salt, pretend it's all normal, then corner me over dessert. I had no intention of eating. I replied, "I will be there at noon. I cannot stay for lunch." Saturday was my prep day. I treated it like the most important project kickoff of my career. My apartment became a war room. I didn't just reprint the documents. I curated them. I went to an office supply store and bought a sleek, professional, matte black binder. I bought a pack of clear sheet protectors. I bought colored tabs. I laid every piece of evidence out on my large concrete dining table. Exhibit A, the forged document, the $60,000 HELOC signature page, printed in high-resolution color. The yellow highlighter was stark against the white paper. Exhibit B, the proof of absence, my Chicago travel itinerary, hotel receipts, and the conference program with my name listed as the keynote speaker. Exhibit C, the financial bleed, 7 years of bank statements, with every single transfer to Aurora Mortgage. Elaine Carroll, or Brianna Carroll, highlighted. Exhibit D, the confessions, transcripts. I had spent Friday night typing out every single word from the screaming voicemails and abusive texts. You've always been a jealous, selfish bitch. You have no idea what you just did. You are destroying this family. All of it, typed in a neutral, 12-point Times New Roman font, as cold and clinical as a police report. I didn't just organize the data, I annotated it. This was my specialty. After all, I was a researcher. I added sticky notes with precise, emotionless labels, written in black felt-tip pen. I found the statement with the $8,500 withdrawal for the new roof, the $3,200 credit card payment for the Florida family trip I wasn't invited on, the $5,000 transfer I'd sent Brianna for her handmade candle shop supplies, which I now suspected was part of the Santa Fe Spa research trip, the treadmill, the sports package, the new leather sofa. It was all there, a map of my own exploitation, rendered in cold, hard numbers. Finally, I drafted a new document. I modeled it after Naomi's legal letter, but I stripped out the legalese. I titled it Terms of Separation. It was a 2-page summary. Page 1 was the accounting. I had put all the highlighted numbers into a spreadsheet. The final number at the bottom made me feel dizzy, but I wrote it down. Total estimated financial support, $312,000. Page 2 was the offer, the same 2 options Naomi had presented. Option A, the private resolution. Martin Carroll confesses to the forgery at Front Range Home Finance. My name is legally removed from all property debts. A non-contact agreement is signed. No criminal charges are filed. Option B, the legal resolution. The 30-day deadline expires. The Carroll proof file is transferred to the district attorney. The consequences are permanent and out of my hands. I printed 3 copies of the summary. I slid every page into a clear sheet protector. I clicked them into the black binder, one by one. The snap of the 3-ring binder closing was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. That night, I couldn't sit still. My body was thrumming with adrenaline, a vibrating, high-frequency wire of dread and resolve. I went to my building's gym. I got on the treadmill and I ran. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until the sweat was stinging my eyes. I ran until my legs felt numb and distant. I was trying to exhaust the panic, to burn off the 34 years of good daughter programming that was screaming at me to stop, to apologize, to go home and beg for forgiveness. I kept my eyes fixed on the digital display, and I repeated my mantra in my head, in time with my pounding feet. I am not going there to apologize. I am not going there to negotiate. I am not going there to be the daughter. I am going there to present the terms. I got back to my apartment, my body exhausted, my mind finally quiet and sharp. I laid out my safety plan. 1. I would park on the street, not in their driveway. I would not be blocked in. I needed a clear path of exit. 2. I would not use my key. I still had one, on an old keychain in the back of a drawer. I would not use it. I would not let myself in. They would have to open the door to me. It was a physical and psychological boundary. 3. My phone would be in my pocket. The voice memo app would be open and recording from the moment I stepped out of my car. Naomi had advised it. It's a one-party consent state. Dylan, she'd said. Get the audio. On Sunday morning, I woke up before my alarm. The air in my apartment was still and gray. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't want the jitters. I drank a glass of water. I stood in front of my closet. I bypassed all my work blazers. Too aggressive. I bypassed my old hoodies. Too familiar. I chose my armor. A pair of dark wash, fitted jeans, a simple, well-made gray cashmere sweater, Flat-heeled leather ankle boots. It was neutral. It was strong. It was the uniform of a person who was not there to fight and not there to surrender. It was the outfit of a person who was simply there to conclude a piece of business. I put the black binder in my leather tote bag. The drive from Denver to Aurora was automatic. My hands knew the route, my car. The same 10-year-old car I'd had since this whole thing started, merged onto the highway. I passed the exit for the mall where my mother and I used to shop, back when she still saw me as a person and not a provider. I passed the turnoff for the bank, the small, unassuming brick branch of Front Range Home Finance. I remembered, with perfect, painful clarity. The first time I'd driven this route with my father, I was 27. He had been so humble, so broken, so grateful. "You're saving us, Dylan," he'd said, his hand on my shoulder. "You're saving this family." I had felt like a hero. Now, 7 years later, I was driving the same road, to the same house, but I finally understood. I wasn't saving anything. I was the life support for a toxic system, and today, I was pulling the plug. I wasn't driving to the house to save it. I was driving there to break the structure of power, the unwritten contract that had bound me since birth. I turned onto their street. It looked painfully normal. Lawns were mowed. A guy was washing his car. I saw my father's truck in the driveway. Brianna's beat-up sedan was parked behind it. They were all here, the whole jury. I parked my car on the street, about 20 feet from their mailbox. I left plenty of room. I sat for a moment. I took one deep breath in. I held it. I let it out. I clicked open my voice memo app and hit record. I slid the phone into my back pocket. I grabbed my tote bag with the black binder. I stepped out of the car. I locked it. I walked up the concrete path, the one I had drawn on with chalk as a kid. I walked up the 2 steps to the front porch. I looked at the familiar faded blue front door. My hand twitched, my muscles still remembering the key. I ignored the instinct. I raised my hand, and like a stranger, like a process server, like an auditor, I rang the doorbell. I heard the deadbolt slide back. The door opened. My mother, Elaine, stood in the entryway. Her face was arranged in a mask of practiced, relieved joy. It was the face she wore when the crisis was over. The prodigal had returned, and everything was about to be normal again. "Oh, Dylan! Honey!" she cried, her voice thick with emotion. She lunged forward, her arms wide for an embrace, the scent of her perfume, the one I paid for, washing over me. "You're here! Thank God, we were so worried." My body reacted before my mind did. I took a half step back, just enough for her arms to find empty air. My tote bag, heavy with the black binder, formed a physical barrier between us. Her arms dropped, her smile faltering, caught between affection and confusion. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was polite, neutral, and did not belong to her daughter. "Dad's text said you wanted to talk." I stepped past her, into the hallway. The house smelled the same: lemon polish, old coffee, and the faint, dusty scent of a life I was no longer part of. The scene in the dining room was set exactly as I had pictured. It was a stage, perfectly blocked for my execution. My father, Martin, was at the head of the table, in the patriarch's chair. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his hands, which were clasped on the polished wood surface. He was radiating the heavy, disappointed gravity of a judge about to pass sentence. The chair to his immediate right, the one I always sat in, was conspicuously empty. It was my designated spot in the dock. In the adjacent living room, Brianna was sprawled on the new leather sofa, the one I had paid for. She was pointedly staring at her phone, scrolling with a furious, jerky motion of her thumb. She was the picture of teenage disinterest, but her entire body was rigid. She was listening to every breath. "Dylan," my father said, his voice a low rumble. He finally looked up. His eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were profoundly, deeply, performatively disappointed. This was his You have broken your father's heart. Look. Sit down. It was a command. I did not sit. I walked to the opposite side of the table, near the entryway. I placed my tote bag on the floor next to my feet. I stood there, my hands loosely at my sides. My mother scurried in, wringing her hands, and took a chair near my father, her eyes darting between us. "We are not here to fight, Dylan," my father began. He had clearly rehearsed this. This was his opening statement. "We are here, as a family, to address this situation. What you did last week. Just turning everything off, without a word, and—" He shook his head, as if baffled by the sheer irrationality of it. "That's not how a family operates. That was irresponsible. That was cruel. Dylan, your mother hasn't slept." Right on cue. My mother's face crumpled. "I've been a wreck," she whispered, her hand going to her chest. "My heart has been pounding. I thought I was having a heart attack. The doctor said I absolutely cannot have any stress. He said it's critical. Are you trying to kill me? Dylan, is that what you want?" It was the classic 1-2 punch. Father's disappointment. Mother's mortal peril. I had been flattened by this combination my entire life. I just stood there. I let the accusations land. I didn't defend. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just listened. I let them present their entire case. I let the silence stretch after my mother's "Are you trying to kill me?" landed. I was no longer a participant. I was an observer, gathering data. My phone was in my back pocket, the microphone dutifully recording every word. The silence made them nervous. My lack of reaction was not in the script. "Well?" my father demanded, his disappointment giving way to impatience. "What do you have to say for yourself? This tantrum has to stop. You've made your point. Now, I need you to go home, turn all the payments back on, and we can put this childishness behind us." He said it with such finality. This is what will happen. He was the judge. He had passed sentence. I was to go and perform my community service. I held his gaze. I took a slow, even breath. "I'm not here to negotiate my monthly payments," I said. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to echo in the room. I reached down, took the black binder from my tote bag, and placed it on the dining room table with a solid, definitive thud. The sound was alien in this room. It was the sound of business. It was the sound of law. "I'm here," I said, my hand resting on the cover, "to talk about this." Brianna's head snapped up from the sofa. My mother's fake crying stopped, her mouth slightly open. My father frowned, his authority challenged. I opened the binder. I didn't move from my spot. I took out the first document, the one in the clear sheet protector, the one with the bright yellow highlight. I slid it across the polished wood table. It glided, perfectly, and came to a stop directly in front of his clasped hands. "I'm here to talk about the $60,000 home equity loan you took out in my name," I said. The air in the room didn't just change, it vaporized. It became a vacuum. My father looked down. I watched his eyes try to process the page. He saw the bank's logo. He saw the number, and he saw the highlighted signature. His face, which had been so full of righteous judgment, went slack. A grayish-white color flooded his skin, starting at his neck. I don't know what that is," he stammered. He tried to muster his judge voice, but it came out as a thin, reedy whisper. That's just bank paperwork. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking," I said, my voice cutting, "about this signature." I reached across and tapped the yellow box with my index finger. My signature, Dylan Carroll. I've never seen this document before. I never signed this paper. So I'm wondering, Dad, how you can explain this signature." He recoiled. He looked from the paper to me, and for the first time in my 34 years, I saw something in my father's eyes I had never seen before. Pure, animal panic. "It must be a mistake," he blustered, trying to regain his footing. "The bank, they must have They must have typed it up wrong. It's a clerical error. Is it? I said, my voice like ice. Because I called the bank. They confirmed the signing took place on October 14th, 3 years ago, at the Aurora branch. I pulled out the next document, my travel itinerary. I slid it across the table. It landed on top of the first. This is my flight confirmation and hotel receipt for the UX Midwest Conference in Chicago. I was checking into the Omni Hotel on October 13th. I was on stage giving a keynote on October 14th. I tapped the paper. I wasn't in Aurora. I wasn't even in Colorado. My mother made a small, choking sound. No. Martin? What is she? That's not. No. She was looking at my father, her face a mask of dawning, horrified realization. Brianna, for the first time, was fully off the sofa. She had moved to the edge of the dining room, her phone clutched in her hand, her face pale and sick. So I'm going to ask you again. Dad, I said, my voice dropping. Explain the signature. He had no answer. He just stared at the papers, his mouth working silently. The patriarch, the judge, the man in charge, had just been vaporized. You forged my name, I stated. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. You committed identity theft. You committed bank fraud. And then, I let the cold rage finally enter my voice. You programmed my bank account to pay for it. You had me, for 3 years, paying off the $60,000 loan that you stole from me. Oh, God, my mother whispered, her hand covering her mouth. This wasn't her script. This wasn't the Dylan is sick script. This was real. I'm not finished, I said. I went back to my binder, and I began to lay out my case, piece by piece. I took out the 7 years of bank statements. I didn't slide them. I fanned them out, one by one, like a hand of winning cards, across the table, covering the polished wood. This, I said, my finger tracing the highlighted lines, is the family you've been talking about, Dad. This is what it really is. This line? That's the $8,500 roof you told me you were just a little short on. This one? The $3,200 charge for your anniversary trip to Florida. This one? The $2,000 down payment on Brianna's car. The one I also co-signed for. This one? The new sofa. The treadmill. The golf clubs. The weekly grocery bill that somehow always included $500 in miscellaneous charges. The papers covered the table, the dining room. His seat of power was now my evidence board. Each highlighted line was a nail in the coffin of his authority. Brianna looked like she was going to vomit. My mother was shaking, her eyes wide with terror, staring at my father. Martin? She whispered. Martin, you told me. You told me she offered. My father just sat there, a collapsed, gray-faced man, staring at the financial autopsy of his own life, laid out for him by the daughter he had tried to sentence. The trial was over. His prosecution had failed. Mine had just begun. I let the sight of the evidence-strewn table hang in the air for a long moment. I let them sit in the wreckage of their own lies. My father was a statue of gray ash. My mother was vibrating with silent, terrified sobs. Brianna was frozen by the doorway, her face a mask of disbelief. So, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet, we are all clear on the facts. Now, we can talk about the consequences. I reached into the binder one last time and pulled out the 2-page summary I had typed. Terms of separation. I have hired an attorney, I announced. The words felt like steel in my mouth. Her name is Naomi Blake. She is a specialist in financial crimes and identity theft. She has my entire file, the forged loan, the bank statements, the transcripts of your voicemails, the proof I was in Chicago. I saw a flicker of a new, different fear in my father's eyes. This was no longer just me. It was a professional. That entire file, I continued, is backed up on a secure, encrypted server. If anything should happen to me, if I'm in an accident, if I'm suddenly unwell, if I'm harassed at my job, that file is automatically released to the Arapahoe County District Attorney's Office, It is an insurance policy. We are all clear on that, correct? My mother let out a strangled gasp, as if I'd slapped her. Here is what happens next, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. I was no longer their daughter. I was a legal representative, reading a contract. You have two options. You have 30 days to choose. I looked directly at my father. He was forced to meet my gaze. Option 1 is the private resolution. Within 30 days, you, Martin Carroll, will walk into the Aurora branch of Front Range Home Finance. You will confess, in full, to the forgery. You will sign any and all documents required to have my name legally and permanently removed from the $60,000 home equity loan. You will also sign all documents to have my name removed from the primary mortgage. You will assume sole and total legal responsibility for both debts. Immediately after, you will both, I shifted my gaze to include my mother, sign a legally binding agreement, drafted by my attorney, stating that you will never again, directly or indirectly, contact me for any form of financial support. You will not text, call, or email me about money. You will not send Brianna to do it for you, if you comply in full. My attorney will hold the file. The criminal charges will not be filed. I paused, letting the weight of the offer settle. An escape, a hard, humiliating, but private escape. Option 2, I said, is the legal resolution. You do nothing. You ignore this. You try to wait me out. You try to call me and cry. You try to handle this in the family. If, at 5 p.m. on the 30th day, I do not have confirmation from the bank and a signed copy of the non-contact agreement, Naomi Blake will walk my entire file into the district attorney's office and hand it over for criminal prosecution. You will be facing felony charges for identity theft and bank fraud. The silence was shattered by my mother's voice. It wasn't a cry, it was a shriek. Jail, she screamed, launching up from her chair. You're threatening to send your own father to jail? Over accounting? Over a few numbers on a piece of paper? We are your family. Dylan, your family. It was the howl of a cornered narcissist, a blend of genuine panic and profound, indignant self-regard. These are not a few numbers, Mom, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the binder in my hand. This is 7 years of my life. This is 7 years of my salary. This is my youth, my future, my chance to have a family of my own. Everything you two sat at that dinner table and mocked me for not having. This is my entire 30s, which you stole and spent. And this, I pointed again to the forged document, is not family, it is a crime. You don't get to call it family when it's love and support, and then call it just accounting when it's a felony. That's when Brianna, silent until now, finally exploded. She stormed into the dining room, her face twisted with a rage that was so pure it was almost impressive. You're just jealous, she spat, her finger jabbing at me. You've always been jealous. You can't stand that they love me. You can't stand that I'm the creative one, the one they cared about. So you have to come in here with your big-shot lawyer and your spreadsheets and wave your money around. You're choosing money over people. You're choosing money over your own family. It was her last, best weapon, the accusation of jealousy, the idea that I was the cold, unloved, money-obsessed one. It used to work. I didn't even raise my voice. I just turned my head and looked at her. Really looked at her. That's a very interesting perspective, Brianna, I said. Let me ask you a hypothetical. If your best friend came to you, crying, and told you that her parents had secretly forged her name on a $60,000 loan and had been siphoning her salary for 7 years to pay for it, what would you tell her? Would you dare tell her to just shut up and take it because it's her family? Would you call her jealous? She stopped. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She had no answer. The accusation of hypocrisy, of basic human decency, was the one thing her narcissistic bubble couldn't deflect. She just stood there, her mouth open, finally, blessedly, silent. I turned back to my father. He hadn't moved. He was just a gray, broken shape at the head of the table. He spoke, For the first time since I had presented the evidence, his voice was a dry rattle, a sound I had never heard. I panicked. "Dylan," he whispered, not looking at me, just staring at the forged signature. The bank was calling about the house. They were going to foreclose. I was so scared. He looked up, his eyes pleading, roomy. "I thought you would understand. I was going to pay it back. I was going to fix it before you ever found out." Even as he said it, the lie died on his lips. We both knew he had no income. We both knew he had no plan. We both knew the pay it back was the oldest, saddest lie in the book. He was just a man who had been caught. The last vestige of my childhood sympathy, the final, programmed instinct to run over and hug him and say, "It's okay, Daddy, I'll fix it," just evaporated. "I do understand, Dad," I said, and my voice was almost gentle, but it was the gentle, clinical voice of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "I understand completely. You were cornered, you were scared, and you chose to commit a crime against your own daughter rather than sell this house. You chose to sacrifice my future to protect your present. I finally understand everything." I let that hang in the air. "And it's because I understand," I finished, "that I am letting the law handle this. I am no longer qualified to be a part of this. I am not your bank, and I am not your judge. I am the victim." I took the 2-page terms of separation and placed it in the center of the table, on top of the financial wreckage. "This is your chance, Dad. This is your one and only chance to fix this yourself, without handcuffs. You have 30 days. Monster!" My mother's voice, a full-throated, guttural wail of despair. She had collapsed back into her chair, her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs. "You are a monster, an ungrateful, unnatural child. To do this to your own father, to your mother. We gave you everything. You are a cold, dead inside monster." I heard the words. I listened to them. They were just sounds. They were the desperate, failing code of a system that had just been unplugged. They were meant to be my execution, the final dose of poison, but the antidote, the cold, hard proof of their own crimes, was laid out on the table. The words couldn't get in. They just bounced off. I turned back to my father. "I will not be taking any more calls or texts from any of you about money. My phone is set to auto-forward your numbers to my attorney's office. If you have questions, if you want to negotiate, if you want to accept the terms, you can talk to Naomi Blake. She will be handling all communication from this point forward." I zipped my empty tote bag. Then, with deliberate, unhurried motions, I began to pack. I picked up the bank statements, one by one. I picked up my travel receipts. I picked up the transcripts of their own words. I slid each one back into its clear plastic sleeve. I did not rush. I was neat. I was organizing my file. The only sound in the room was the quiet slide of paper into plastic, the snap of the binder rings opening, and the sound of my mother's hysterical, broken sobs. I clicked the black binder shut. The sound was as final as a gavel. I placed it in my bag. I looked at the table. It was empty now, except for the single, 2-page document sitting in front of my father's chair. His 2 options, his life, in his hands. A time bomb, ticking down from 30 days, left in the center of the dining room that I had paid for. I turned, and I walked out of the room. The calls, just as Naomi had predicted, began 48 hours after my father left the bank. But I was no longer the target. I had, on Naomi's advice, set up a filter that automatically routed any call or text from their numbers, or any unknown caller, to a third-party voicemail transcription service. I would get an email, once a day, with a sterile, typed-out log of their hysteria. The first was from my mother. It was a 5-minute, single block of text transcript, a near-incoherent shriek of text. I was a monster. I was a serpent. I had killed my father. I was making them homeless. I was, and this was her favorite word, unnatural. The second was from Brianna. It was shorter, but more acidic, a stream of profanities, accusations of jealousy, and a final, pathetic demand to know who was going to pay her rent. The third, and last, was from my father. It was just 3 transcribed words. You win, Dylan. And then, just like before, the silence returned, but this time it was a true, clean silence. The war was over. I hadn't won. The other side had simply, finally, been disqualified from the match. Life began to move in a new, unfamiliar rhythm. My next paycheck came. It landed in my account, and it stayed. I looked at the full, 5-figure number. I paid my own rent. I paid my own utility bill. And then, for the first time in my adult life, I moved the rest. I set up an automatic transfer. Not to Front Range Home Finance. Not to Elaine Carroll. An automatic transfer to my own high-yield savings account, to my new retirement fund, to my buy a condo fund. I felt a small, strange click in my chest. It wasn't joy. It was the sound of a major system, offline for a decade, finally rebooting. A few weeks later, I had a major client presentation in South Aurora, a new account I had landed, a project I was leading. I was in my same 10-year-old car, the one with the rattling engine, but I had already started test driving new ones. My savings account, growing daily, gave me that power. The meeting was only a few exits away from their street. I didn't have to go. My GPS routed me on the main highway, but as I approached the exit, a cold, clinical curiosity took over. I needed to see the data point. I needed to close the case file. I took the exit. I drove through the quiet, familiar suburban streets. I turned onto their block, and I saw it. It wasn't subtle. It was a large, offensively bright red and white sign. It was staked deep into the center of the front lawn, the lawn I had paid a landscaping service to mow, fertilize, and edge for 7 years. It was now patchy, brown, and overgrown with weeds. The sign was from a budget realty group. For sale, the main letters shouted, and underneath, in smaller damning print, bank owned. I slowed my car to a crawl, idling in the middle of the empty street. I just looked. The house. It looked so small, pitifully small, all my life. It had been this huge, looming entity in my mind, a monument of obligation. Now, it just looked like a cheap, tired, 2-story box. The paint, the expensive beige I had paid for 4 years ago, was peeling under the gutters. The shrubs I'd had planted were overgrown. The curtains in the front window, the custom ones my mother had to have, were drawn, but they looked gray and lifeless, even in the morning light. It wasn't a home. It wasn't my childhood nest. It was a seized asset. It was the physical evidence of a crime, a structure built on a foundation of lies, entitlement, and fraud. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't feel a single pang of nostalgia. I didn't feel sadness, or anger, or even a sense of victory. I just observed. I didn't crane my neck, looking for my father's truck in the driveway. It was empty. I didn't look for Brianna's car parked at the curb. I didn't wonder where they had gone. I didn't care. It was, for the first time in my entire existence, profoundly, completely, and liberatingly, not my problem. I remembered the hundreds of times I'd written a check, my stomach tight with resentment, and told myself, I'm doing this to save their house. I'm keeping a roof over their heads. I stared at the peeling paint and the weed-choked lawn, and I finally realized the truth. That house wasn't their home. It was my prison. It was the physical manifestation of my servitude. It was the black hole that had consumed my youth. Every paycheck, every promotion, every 60-hour workweek, every skipped vacation, every lonely night. It had all been fed into that house. That house was the collateral for my stolen life. I whispered the words to the windshield, a final report to the universe. I held you up for 7 years. My work, my money, my life, it held you up. Now that I'm gone, you're collapsing. I looked at the bank-owned sign. That's not my fault. That is gravity. It's just, what happens? I took my foot off the brake. I pressed the accelerator. I drove to the corner, turned right, and did not look in the rearview mirror. It was not a victory. It was just the end of the loss. I had finally stopped the bleeding. That night, I came home from my client meeting. It had gone perfectly. I had landed the account. My boss was thrilled. I walked into my apartment, my clean, quiet, beautiful apartment. I had bought a new sofa, a sleek, modern, gray sectional. I had paid for it in cash. My new linen sheets were on my bed. My new brass lamp was on my nightstand, next to my stack of hardcover books. I went to my kitchen. A month ago, after my first full paycheck, I had bought a bottle of wine, not a $20 decent bottle, a $90 Cabernet from Napa, a bottle I had stared at in wine shops for years. It had been sitting on my counter, waiting. I opened it. I poured a glass. The wine was dark, almost black, and smelled like berries and oak. I walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the glittering lights of the Denver skyline. For years, this view had felt like a taunt, a reminder of the successful life I was pretending to have. Tonight, it just looked like home. I thought of my mother's last transcribed shriek, "You have destroyed this family." I sipped the wine. It was smooth and complex and worth every penny. A family, I thought, isn't a suicide pact. It's not a business arrangement where one person provides all the capital and the others provide all the demands. A family doesn't laugh at your emptiness. A family doesn't forge your name. A family doesn't build its foundation on the ruins of one of its own. Whatever that thing in Aurora was, they had destroyed it. Long before I ever hired Naomi, I had just been the last one to acknowledge the building was already in ashes. I had just, finally, stopped trying to rebuild it, all by myself, every single day. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them. I'm not even sure I'm interested in the concept. Forgiveness feels like another demand, another emotional check they would expect me to write. Forgiveness is not my goal. Peace is my goal. My savings account is my goal. My condo, which I am now pre-approved for, is my goal. My future, my choices, my dreams. They are my goal. I don't know where they are. I don't know what they're doing. And I have no intention of finding out. My revenge isn't their ruin. My revenge is my freedom. My revenge is my 401k. My revenge is the sound of my own key, in my own door, to my own life. I raised my glass to the city lights. I wasn't toasting their loss. I wasn't toasting my victory. I was toasting my balance sheet. Saying no to them, I whispered to the glass, was the first time I ever said yes to me. If you are listening to this, and you are the designated ATM for your family, if you are the one everyone calls when they're just a little short, I want you to do one thing. Start a folder. Don't do it out of anger. Do it as a researcher. Start collecting the data. Save the texts. Log the transfers. Look at the cold, hard numbers. And when you are ready, when you see the true cost, find the strength to say, enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments and share your own thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that hype button so more people can find it and feel less alone.